Day 5, Masterclass 2021, OpenStreetMap, an introduction by Ms. Sharon Omoja, Introduction to Drones, Ms. Leigh Lunas.
Hello everyone, welcome to this session. I'm Sharon Omoja from OpenStreetMap Kenya. I'm also the Sub-Saharan Africa Regional Ambassador for Women in Geospatial class. I'm going to take you through OpenStreetMap. What is it and how can you get involved? So OpenStreetMap, what is this thing that we hear that is called OpenStreetMap? OpenStreetMap, it's a free and editable map of the whole world. It was founded in 2004 because there was lack of good map data to use, and it was anticipated that open free map data will tremendously benefit humanitarian aid and economic development. And this was proven during the Haiti earthquake, where we had volunteers around the world that contributed data to OpenStreetMap, and this data was used by international organizations, humanitarian organizations, and even government agencies to help respond to the earthquake in Haiti. Yeah, so this is how OpenStreetMap looks like. You can see this is data that has been contributed by volunteers around the world. Yeah, so OpenStreetMap works through local knowledge and community organization. As much as we have volunteers around the world, it's also important to have people from the area that is being mapped who better understands how the area is. Because if I'm mapping buildings in India and I don't understand the types of buildings and how can I name the buildings, it's important to have people who have the local knowledge as well in those areas. And it also works through community organizations. We have various community organizations around the world. We have country-based organization that includes OpenStreetMap Kenya, OpenStreetMap Ghana, OpenStreetMap Mali. We also have regional-based organizations. We have OpenStreetMap Africa, OpenStreetMap Asia, and now we have the global OpenStreetMap community. Yeah, so the data on OpenStreetMap is built by a community of mappers that contribute and maintain the data, majorly through volunteering. Yeah, as I mentioned, it's a free and editable map of the whole world, so anyone can add to the map and anyone can improve it with local knowledge. That is, if you come from the place where the specific area where the data has been added, now you can improve it in the local knowledge because you are the person who better understands the name of that road, the name of that building. Yeah, so it's always important to improve the data that has been added by volunteers worldwide with your local knowledge. And the good thing about OpenStreetMap is that you can download this data and use it in your projects, use it in whatever thing you want to use it for. Yeah, so the data is free and you can download the data for any area for your use. So how do you get involved in OpenStreetMap? All you need is an internet connection and you sign up to OpenStreetMap. You sign up for an account. Yeah, so to create an account in OpenStreetMap, you go to openstreetmap.org, and then on the right hand side there is always the sign up button, so you can sign up. Yeah, after you click the sign up, there is always the pop-up. Now you can fill in your account details, your email address, confirm email address, the display name, and then you create a password. There is always the contributor terms. Yeah, it's advisable to read the contributor terms, check on the agreement, and then you're good to go. You have an account with OpenStreetMap. And now anytime when you want to add data, you can always log in with your email address or the username that you created and your password and your password. Yeah, so after you have signed in, now you have an account. How do you go about adding data to OpenStreetMap? Yeah, now that takes us to mapping with ID editor, because that's one of the tools that we use when you're adding data in OpenStreetMap. So the ID editor is a user-friendly tool. It allows you to make direct changes in OpenStreetMap from an internet browser, whether Mozilla or whether you're using Chrome or Edge, Safari. You can always make edits on ID on OpenStreetMap. Yeah, so ID, one of the disadvantages of ID is that it always require a consistent internet connection, because you may lose your edits because it doesn't allow you to map offline. Yeah, so with ID you always require you always map online. So when you're connected to the internet. So how do we start mapping? After you've signed in with your OSM account, like for example, just here, so you can click on the edit button. You can see we have edit with ID, we have edit with Potlatch, and we have edit in JOSAM. So for this session, I'm going to take you through how you can edit with ID. After you click on edit with ID, now you can zoom to any area that you want to edit and start editing. Yeah, so there's also the tasking manager. Sometimes when you're working on a project on the tasking manager, I will talk about the tasking manager in details. You can always click on, you can always make ID as your default editor when you're mapping on the tasking manager. I'm going to talk about the tasking manager in details. Yeah, so now you have logged into OSM. Now you want to start editing with ID. What do? First, you have to find the area that you want to map. What do you want to map? Do you want to map buildings? Do you want to map roads? Do you want to map land use? Do you want to map waterways? Yeah, so now you have to find what you want to map. And then the next thing is now to trace whatever you're mapping. Now this requires image interpretation skills. We have point features, we have line features, we have arrow features. For example, if you want to map buildings, you always use the area tool, that is for mapping polygons. Yeah, so you select the area tool and then you trace over the building that you're mapping as it is on the image. After you have mapped the building, it's always advisable to tag what you have mapped. Is it a building? There is always the tags. You'll be given the options. There is always the tags. Is it a building? Yes. Is it a road? You can always tag the roads with the various tags for roads. And then after you're done with the tagging, it's always advisable for squared buildings, ensure they're squared. You can do this by selecting the building and then hold with the Q key on your keyboard, and that's how you square buildings in ID. What about for round buildings? If we are mapping an area that have huts, because we don't only have squared buildings, we also have round buildings, circular shaped buildings. Yeah, so for circular shaped buildings, you still use the area feature, the area tool. You click on the area tool and then you draw your points around. You trace the circular buildings, and then with this, unlike the square buildings where you use Q key, with the circular buildings you select the building and then you use the O key on your keyboard to make the building a perfect circle. Yeah, so just a recap of what you have talked about. The first thing is find whatever you want to map. Do you want to map buildings? Do you want to map waterways? Do you want to map roads? And you should interpret what you want to map. Don't map roads as rivers. Interpret it. Interpret the image. Is this a road? Is this a building that I want to map? Or is it a tree? Yeah, so after you have interpreted it and now you're sure that this is a building that I want to map, now trace the building as it appears on the image. You trace the building footprints, and then if it's a square building, you use the Q key. If it's a circular building, you use a O key on your keyboard, and then always remember to tag the features that you have mapped. If it's a building, you click on the building, and then it's tagged. After you have done mapping, it's time to save your work. On top of on OpenStreetMap toolbar, there is always the save button. So you click on it, and then it will save your work. And it's always recommended to frequently save your work because of uncertainties in internet connection. You may lose your work because you didn't save if you lose the internet connections. Yeah, and always remember to leave a chance comment on which project were you working on, or what were you doing. Always ensure you leave a comment. And if you're using the tasking manager, you are always given an option. After you have saved your work, you're always given an option. Is the task completely mapped? You can click yes and then submit. Or are you not done mapping the task? You can click no and then submit. So the task will be open for someone else to continue mapping. Key things to remember, and this I want to emphasize: square buildings, ensure they're squared. They're squared. This is not square. This is not a perfect 90 degrees angles on the corners. So ensure they're squared using the Q key. For circular buildings, ensure you use the O key. And make sure your buildings do not touch or overlap unless they definitely should. Yeah, so you have to map your buildings so that they do not overlap other buildings. Yeah, and there are others where you're not supposed like to map. Don't Sometimes you get a mapper who has mapped some areas as a building, but is not a building. We always don't recommend deleting a mapper's work, because that interferes with the history. Yeah, so what you can always do is you can always move the nodes so as to fit the feature that you're mapping, and always remember to leave a comment what you did, or are you modifying nodes and all that. Another thing is on tagging features that you've mapped. Remember to tag every feature that you've mapped, be it roads, be it water features, be it buildings. As you can see on the left hand side, buildings that are not tagged are outlined in white, but when they have already been tagged, now they are outlined in red. Another common mistakes to avoid: trace each building individually in the tile, as you can see on the left. Many a times people can for all these buildings they map it as one and then they tag it as building. That is not recommended unless you're mapping it as a land use, like land use residential. That is recommended, but you don't have to map the whole these buildings together as one building. That is not recommended. You can see here, trace the shape of the building exactly as you see it in the image. First, interpret the image. How does this building looks like? What is the shape? Trace it as you see it in the image. Like you can see here, someone just traced this as a completely rectangular building, but you can see this is how the shape of the buildings looks like. So trace it as it appears on the image, and that will require you to have high imagery interpretation skills to know how the buildings appears and how you can trace the footprint. And now on to the tasking manager. The tasking manager is a tool for coordination of volunteers and organizations to map on OSM. Yeah, so it's designed to divide up mapping project into smaller tasks, and it shows the areas needed to be mapped and which areas needed to be validated. So this is how the tasking manager looks like. So to log in into tasking manager, you go to tasks.hotosm.org and you click on login. When you click on login, it takes you to your OpenStreetMap account and it requires your access. So you grant tasking manager access, and then now you can start mapping. So we have this here. If you want to find a project, you can always go to explore projects. You can search project. If you know the project number, you can always search by project number. Difficulty level, you can always search. We have beginner projects, we have projects for intermediate mappers, we have projects for advanced mappers. There are more filters. You can filter by organizations, you can filter by the course. Is it for disaster management? Is it for gender equality? And this one for if you know a specific project task, the project number, you can always search by the number. Yeah, so to find the project, you go to tasks or to OSM. After you log in and grant access, you can explore the project, search for the project IDs if you know the project ID, and you click on it and it opens. now on where to map. After you have clicked on the specific project that you have to map, you click on contribute, which is always on the lower right hand of the tasking manager. And for your editor that you're going to use, or your, for now, because we have been talking about ID, you'll pick on ID as your editor. That's your editor of choice. But you also have these ones as other editors of choice, Geospatial, Potlatch, and Field Papers. But for now, as a beginner, you will pick on ID editor. The area for mapping is always split into grids, which have various which represent various details, and which you can see on the legends. Yeah, so for white tiles, those are always tiles that are available for mapping. For those that are in cyan, those are ready for validation. They've been mapped and checked, like it's completely mapped, so they are available for validation. Those that are always in orange are those tasks that were mapped and were mapped as like completely mapped, but when someone goes to look at the task, he finds that a lot of things have been left out. So we always tag that as more mapping needed. The green ones, the green tiles, are those that have been finished. They've been completely mapped and completely validated. And then we have unavailable priority areas. And then when you click on a specific tile on the tasking manager, you always see a padlock. That means it's locked, so that no one can open the task. Just only you, unless you unlock it. So the square you select can now be edited, and the area is always highlighted in a pink box. So you're not supposed to map outside this bounding box. For example, let's say we want to search for a project. Let's say that there is this project. The project number is 8759. It's by Hot. The project is about COVID-19, Yelimane, Sakhi, QGIS region, Mali. There is the project instructions. It's always important before you start mapping. It's always important to look at the project instructions, because it tells you which imagery to use. What are we mapping? Don't just start mapping. You may start mapping roads when the project needs you to map only buildings. Yeah, so it's important to always go through the project instructions. And now this is the area. This is the project area that you're supposed to map. And now you can see the legend to tell you which areas have not been mapped, which ones have been finished, which ones have been validated. The project description. It's also important to go through the project description to understand what the project needs. For example, the one that we have just looked at now, this is Hot is mapping Cusco region in Peru at the request of the regional government to support their COVID-19 responses and all that. Now that's this description on what the project is all about. The coordination is which organization is coordinating the project and who created the project. Instruction, as I mentioned, it's very important to always read the instruction before starting to map, because it shows what is required in the project. Are you mapping buildings only, rivers only, or are you mapping both, and which imagery are you use. You can't start using Maxar, maybe the project requires you to use Bing. So it's important to go through the instructions before starting to map. Now you have done all that, you have read through the description, the instruction. How do I start mapping? Yeah, so on the right hand side you can see that the project has been divided into smaller tiles, which we call task. Yeah, so with this you can use the legend as a guide. So the white tiles are those that are available for mapping, the cyan ready for validation, the green ones are those that have already been validated, and the ones that has a padlock, those have been locked, like there is someone that is working on the task. So if you want to open a project, you can open a project randomly, or you can click on a specific project and you lock it and you start mapping. Selecting an editor. After you have selected the tile that you want to start mapping, okay, the tile or the task, now here is where you select your editor of choice. We have ID editor, Geospatial, Potlatch, Field Papers. For now, our editor of choice will be ID. You click on ID as our editor of choice, and then you click map selected task. Yeah, so you can always choose a task randomly by clicking map task. When you click map a task, it just chooses a project. It chooses a tile that is available for mapping randomly for you. Otherwise, you can always click on the specific tile that you want to map. Let's say you want to map this one, you just click on it and then it will open. So when you click on ID editor, it takes you to ID. It takes you to ID, the ID. And now, as we mentioned when we are doing the ID, if it's a road that you're mapping, you use the line tool to trace the road as it appears on the image. If it's an area feature that you're mapping, like buildings, use the area tool to trace the buildings. If it's a point, you use the point tool. For JOSAM, you have to have the JOSAM software installed in your computer and opened before you click a task on the tasking manager. And now you are ready to map. After you have done mapping the specific tile that you locked for mapping and you're sure all objects have been mapped, now it's time to finish editing in your preferred editor. After you have first you have to save your edits. After you have saved your edits, you go back to the tasking manager and it will ask you on the completion, is this task completely mapped? If you're sure all objects have been mapped as instructed, you click on yes, and then you leave a comment. What were you doing? I was mapping buildings, I was mapping nodes, and you click on submit task. If it is not completely mapped, maybe you started mapping and then you got committed, you got something else to work on, you can always click on no, and then you just submit the task. You leave a comment and you submit the task such that the task is going to be open for someone else to map it. Yeah, if you're using JOSAM, on the JOSAM tool, there is an option to upload your edits after you have done using it. It's always recommended with JOSAM as well. There is the add comment session. Click yes if the task is completely mapped, and then you submit the task. Now, if your task is not completely mapped, as I said, you click on no, but you still leave a comment on what you're doing, what you are mapping, and then you submit the task. Saving your work is important. Always make sure you save your work. Leave a comment, and then when the task is completely mapped, click yes. If it's not mapped, no. Always remember to submit the task. Thank you.
Hi everyone. Good day. I hope you are safe and comfortable in your own space. I'm so excited to share with you my topic, Introduction to Drones. But first, I would like to take this opportunity to thank Sakhi and Women in Geospatial for organizing this masterclass. I hope my presentation for today will encourage you to learn more about drone applications. So again, hi ladies, hi everyone, I'm Leigh Lunas. I'm a mapper and a nature enthusiast. Occasionally, I fly drones too. I've been in the geospatial industry for 10 years now as a GIS consultant for global projects. I am a core volunteer of GeoLadies PH. I am the geospatial technical analyst of Philippines Flying Labs, and I've been a volunteer of OpenStreetMap since 2013. So anyway, self-promoting, if you wanna get some drones, nature, geospatial content in your feed, you can follow me on Instagram, on Twitter, it's geolayers or Laymedi. And if you want to check my OSM contribution, my OSM ID is geolayers as well. So so I map places I explore. I use maps for navigation, safety, I share information and participate in local mapping efforts. So when I hike or run, I use my watch to get the tracks and I upload them in OSM. And I also use other people's track for my navigation. And I'm a heavy user of maps.me. It's an offline based map. And I use Osmand and GoMap for my on-the-go OSM contribution. And I use this Relive for just making a 3D visualization of a track. And I am usually involved and participate in local mapping communities, and I advocate in them, such as mapping mental health facilities, breastfeeding stations, safe spaces for LGBTQ, humanitarian OpenStreetMap, and others. So just to give you a little bit of a background of GeoLadies PH. So about more than more than a decade ago, mapping parties in the Philippines kind of looks like this. So it is in 2010, 2011, 2009. So there are a few ladies involved in mapping activities. And it was actually one of the local mappers, Sir Manning, who pointed out that we need to change the ratio. And he also began the idea of having a group like GeoLadies. So how do we change the ratio? So we start by creating space. GeoLadies PH recognizes that in order to make a more inclusive and holistic maps, we need different mappers from different perspectives and experiences. So in 2019, our first workshop titled When Women Map, during the Pista ng Mapa or Festival of Maps, where we encourage the participants to map their local environment and highlight important places for them. After that, we reached out to other GeoLadies and created mapathons, meetups, online community to get more ladies active and engaged in MAPI events. So this is in 2019, where we held our first drone workshop, Care Philippines Flying Labs, where women had a chance to fly actual drones for practice. So if this was a live masterclass or a workshop, I will definitely use drones for, so that you can use them properly and show some maneuvering tricks. Okay, so all right, now we get to the content. So what are drones? Drones literally means male bees or a monotonous sound. If you have a drone or if you know someone who has a drone, definitely that buzzing sound, you can hear that like so loudly anywhere. So basically drones are aircrafts or ships that do not have a pilot, but are controlled by someone on the ground. So drones can range from the size of airplanes to the size of bumblebees. The first, these are just like some historical fun facts. So it was first used for military purposes in Austria way back in 1800s, where balloons are carrying the explosives. And the first use of drones with cameras for reconnaissance was during the Vietnam War. So this is the drone that they used. And recreational RC planes or remote control planes became big during the 1960s. So I just want to share this, this video showing how powerful drones can be. So be very careful with using it, by the way. So yeah, you can imagine using your fingers, slicing your fingers when you're not careful in using them. So yeah, drones are very powerful. Oops. Okay, so I started using drones in 2018, but the start of the golden age of drones is in 2010. So these are just company logos that are, this is just an indication of the number of organizations contributing to the drone ecosystem since 2018. This includes hardware, software, sensors, education, online services, and end users. So this picker box is just the top 100 or less companies in the entire world, and the smaller one has more companies. So the potential of jobs of the future and new jobs are not even existing yet, because the drone industry is booming and continuously growing. So the opportunities for young and technologically adept people are endless. So this is in 2018. So imagine what it can do in 2020, 2025, 2030, and so on and so forth. So it's endless and it's very exciting. So, okay, so there are many types of drones, and these are just the most popular ones. So fixed wing, rotary wing, and VTOL. So a fixed wing, it can do longer flight durations at a higher speed. It's suitable for larger areas and require a runway for takeoff and landing. And for the rotary wing, which is a very common in a commercial type of drone, it's suitable for close range inspections and for smaller areas with limited space for takeoff. It's also there's a vertical takeoff and landing. So VTOL is vertical takeoff landing. It's just a combination of the two. So it's suitable for long range flights, and yeah, it takes off and lands like a rotary wing. Okay, so, oh, sorry, I'm adding to it. Okay, so adding here would be FPV drones or racer drones used for racing. So it's a rotary type of drone. Okay, so what are drones used for? So drones are popularly used for taking photos, videos of for commercial use, travel, real estate. So real estate and yeah, so you can do a video, photos, and you can programmatically use drones for some light shows. And like I mentioned before, drones can also be used for racing, which is a recreational thing to do when you're interested in building your own drones and using it for racing. So yeah. See? And okay, so other drone applications is for security, search and rescue. Like it can be used for aerial reconnaissance, crowd monitoring, aerial traffic and security watch. And yeah, so aerial photography for mapping. So for detailed measurements in the preparation of ortho maps to determine land use and environmental condition, among other things. So you can create high resolution digital elevation model, or this one that shows elevation, and orthophoto, so it's a high resolution image of an area. And if you digitize some features, you can actually make this 3D view. I think this was made in QGIS, so it can be done. So it's because it's very detailed and high resolution. You can digitize features like roads, buildings, and other facilities very clearly. As you can see the edges of the building. This is a flooded part of the road, and even pedestrian lanes and stuff like that. It's very, very, very clear. And yeah, so since it provides you some elevation, you can actually have this cross section showing elevation of building, roads, etc. Yeah, so this is the, I don't know, this is probably a school, and this is the digital elevation model of it. Yeah, this was also done in QGIS. So this is just to show you that you can also create a 3D video showing the terrain of an area. this is actually one of the UNESCO heritage sites in the Philippines. It's a rice terraces. So it's this one. You can see the terrain and how accurately it was shown in this video. Yeah, okay. All right, so mapping and surveying. If you use ground control points, it can make the height and location accuracy higher for survey grade results. So it can generate easily point clouds for digital height models, for topographic surveys, location and as-built drawings, and create of volume and hydraulic models. So you can see here that this slope is highlighted here. So this is the slopey part. You can generate this from the drone pictures. Okay, so for disaster risk management and monitoring. So this is actually we surveyed a remote island in the Philippines for marine conservation. This one. And this is showing the crops that are destroyed after a typhoon. And this one is a 3D visualization of stilt houses built after a fire incident happened in the area. So you can use drones for that. And for agriculture, so precision farming, it can determine degree of weed for site-specific herbicide applications, determination of the biomass, crop growth and food quality, monitoring of crops for harvest and logistic optimization. And also you can check the if you actually add another sensor other than the RGB, which is like typically in a commercial drone. So you can add another sensor there. You can actually get the vegetation index or vegetation health if you need. And this one, it says here, the Cornell University researchers are using drone technology to more accurately measure surface reflectivity on the landscape, a technological advance that could offer a new way to manage climate change. So yeah, they put another sensor in this drone. Right. Okay, so for agriculture as well, so you can use drones to spray the crops. And I remember during pandemic, some cities use drones to disinfect some of their areas. Yeah, you can use this. Okay, so cargo delivery drone. So just like Amazon or UPS or in any humanitarian works, you can use drones for delivering medicines, relief operations, lab samples, package delivery in Amazon. It's yeah, as long as it can carry the weight, it can actually drones can actually deliver than a person. Okay, so for construction management or infrastructure inspection, so you can monitor all the phases of construction activities, calculate of earthworks volumes, reduce inspection time, and provide a high resolution geotag photos and videos. So yeah, for example, this is probably, yeah, this is a bridge. You don't need to inspect these one by one. You can just fly a drone and get the video for it. And it, yeah, and do the inspection. And also for wildlife monitoring. So drones, okay, so drones can be used to track animal migratory patterns, count animal population, and you can also scare poachers and explore new territories without disturbing animals. Yeah, yeah, but you can also observe them from a distance. You don't need to go closer to them. Same as for underwater monitoring. So there's an aerial drone and there's also like a marine drone. It's this one. Okay, you can do some coral reef monitoring or tracking marine species. I don't know if you watch some documentation in National Geographic, but now they have a special kind of drone for this. They use it for documentation as well. So who can fly drones? You can fly drones. Everyone can fly drones. So in the Philippines, this is from the Civil Aviation Authority of the Philippines. This is in 2019. Only 8% of certified drone pilots are women. I mean, relatively, it's higher than the world, which is, I think, maybe 4 or 5%. But it wouldn't hurt if we increase the numbers. This is in 2019. After giving all these workshops and talks about drones and encouraging women and meeting a lot of women who uses drones worldwide, I think the numbers are getting higher, which is very promising and encouraging as well. So we don't hate, we aviate. So even kids, as long as they're enthusiastic about it, it doesn't matter age, gender, or any intersectionality. As long as you're curious and eager to innovate, drones are for you. So if you want more reason to fly a drone, you can check this. So it's fun and monitoring work. We are basically fun, racing, mapping, sitting video. You can check all these reasons. But mostly you can see it's fun to do. And yeah, so for safety, so you have to ask these questions. Is it legal? Are you adhering to the local rules and regulations? Is it safe? Is it ethical? So you have to ask these questions before you fly a drone in any area. So these are the drone's social code of conduct from We Robotics. So do no harm, familiarize yourself with the local context, and be extra cautious when deploying in sensitive situations. Be open, share flight activities as widely as possible, and engage with locals before deploying. Be prepared, get training and practice experience with your drone, and create contingency plans for any unintended consequences. Fly responsibly, so operate drones with a clear purpose and ensure any benefits clearly outweigh the risks. And lastly, think about your data. So what you collect, use, manage, share, and store data responsibility. Share your data openly when possible. So before I end my presentation, so these are just some flying tips based on my experience. First is don't be afraid of crashing. It's bound to happen. Everyone's gonna make mistakes, and don't be afraid, take some risks. Well, take some calculated risks. It doesn't matter. It's a learning process. And you should always research your area very well, check the weather, proximity to airports, people, or restricted buildings, find takeoff and landing area if possible, and always cache your base map just in case the internet is not good. And if you have an app, it's called UAV Forecast. You should always check that app just in case. And yeah, I mean, don't be afraid to use your drones. Don't be afraid to take risks. And yeah, it's fun to do. It's fun to do it with friends. It's fun to do alone. And the possibilities of drones are endless. You can also do you can do the hardware, you can do the software, it doesn't matter. It's as long as you're having fun and you're enjoying and you're learning as well. So yep, that's about it. Thank you. Salamat, Kitos. And yeah, you can follow us on Facebook and on Twitter. And you can send us an email to geoladiesph@gmail.com. And this is my Instagram and Twitter handler and OSM. Thank you.
Thank you.